Okay, I think we'll just go with what we have here now, and whoever joins in can join in. We're recording this, so just for those who are here and who are not here, we will have the recording available for you afterwards if you choose to want to see it again. So thank you all for joining. My name's Tony Capraletti. I'm a solutions architect here at ProServe IT, and today we are going to go through and review basically some stuff we've already covered in other previous webinars with Teams, Teams Voice, and Teams Calling. Just going to run through some of the features and why maybe you want to look at Teams Voice. We'll talk about licensing a little bit because that becomes a hot topic of conversation, and why it might be good for your organization, things like that. So let's kick things off again. I think the next slide just shows myself as being the speaker. If you do hear anybody else talking on the call today, I do have some of my marketing team here, Holly Bignell and Joy Fajardo. They are part of the marketing team, so if you do hear somebody else talking, it will be one of them lovely ladies. Again, I'm Tony Capraletti. I'm a solutions architect. I deal with the modern workplace stack within ProServe IT, so that pretty much covers Teams and SharePoint for the most part, and some other applications like Exchange and what's it called? Yeah, Active Directory, Azure to a certain extent. I'm comfortable talking about Azure. So yeah, primarily it's going to be Teams and SharePoint which I deal with. So the agenda. So we're going to go through some of the features, benefits, and possible use cases for Teams Voice. We'll talk about conferencing, PSTN, and direct routing scenarios, some different options that you can use Teams with. Some of you on this call, I know, just by recognizing some of the names, have kind of started to use Teams already. It's going to be kind of more of a refresher for you, but for those who haven't turned up Teams Voice yet, hopefully you find some good content out of this, and I'm sure it's going to spark some questions. So please feel free to drop questions in the inside the chat window, and some of the moderators will take a look, and we'll try to get to those throughout this next 30 minutes or so. And if not, we'll try to address them at the end. And if things that we don't get to, we will try to address them afterwards, either via email or we'll set up a private phone call with each of you and go through them. And number 4, licensing, and then we'll get into next steps, some possible options for you guys as customers. There's some offers out there that we have. There's some things that you might be able to take advantage of from that are available through Microsoft. And then we can get into, again, some Q&A. So really, most of us who are trying to adopt Teams, you've either turned on Teams already. Most companies have already either turned on Teams and are using it from a collaboration standpoint. And now the next step generally has been to turn on some of the voice features, whether that be conferencing as a first step, and then further on to that would be like the actual full-fledged telephony solution that is offered there. And again, one of the great things about Teams that I found anyway is the fact that it's pretty much good and travels with you. It allows you to use your mobile device, and that's why I have this picture on the screen here as a mobile device solution, because really that's what it is. We're pretty much all on the go all the time now, and sitting down at your computer is one use case, but majority of us are going to be using it either from a tablet or even a mobile phone. So using this in your car, it's easy access to actually just one click a button to join a meeting or even start a phone call. It's actually really, really nice in that way. So these are kind of just showing you some of the different use cases and access features that you can use with Teams. And again, this platform, Teams, was built for the mobile device or mobile world, right? It was built as fully cloud-based solution, so there's no real need for anything on premises to make this solution work. So that's again one of the big selling features of this technology. And again, using it primarily for communication. Most of us have been using Teams for chat. Again, adding on to chat and is using it for document management, even document collaboration, co-authoring with multiple users on documents. And again, what you're starting to see now is that more and more companies are building their applications or their apps, these mobile device apps for Teams, and again, mobile devices. So the fact that you can add those into your Teams client and be able to use them in some way that actually works for your business, this is the future. And this is actually probably the next step after even turning on Teams Voice is going to be the application access that is available throughout Teams, right? And so Microsoft, the way that they envision this Teams platform is that it really is kind of like I'll say the dashboard, right? So when you come in the morning or you open up your computer, you're kind of opening up your communication portal, and really Microsoft is looking at it as that they want you to use Teams as be your hub for communications. So previously to Teams, the dashboard used to be Outlook, but I see technology is moving away from Outlook being the centralized dashboard into a more live communication application such as Teams. I'll pause there for a second, see if anybody has any questions around that. If not, we'll keep pressing on.
Hi, Tony. So we actually do have one question from Kevin in the chat window here. So if our users are licensed for phone system, are we able to bring our personal cellular service to Teams calling and use direct routing or operator connect to port calls from a DID to our devices? We have a remote team and do not have enterprise devices.
Okay, I'm reading this on the screen here, just reading over the question. If you're licensed for phone system, we're able to bring our cellular service. So I think what you're asking, Kevin, is a feature that is not yet available, but it's a great question. And I think what you're going to start to notice in the next probably 6 months to a year is that there's going to be carriers that offer this sort of service. And you mentioning Operator Connect, that's a feature that just now came out through some of the telcos here in Canada. So what I'm hearing through the grapevine is that these features are going to probably start to be available in the next 6 months or so. Right now, I don't believe it's available from the way that you're describing it, but there's some flavor of it that might be like a workaround at this point. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, so I wanted to go over a couple different options. So for those of us who are not aware, when we're looking at Teams Voice as your like corporate calling system, really let's think of it this way: is that Teams can be a full telephony PBX replacement for what you have currently today. Assuming that you don't need any specific contact center or call center features that are required. I won't get into the details of what those are right now, but just know that there's nothing that is native within inside Microsoft Teams that is a replacement for a full-fledged contact center functionality. But other than that, it is a full PBX solution that can take in or handle your incoming call flows and then distribute them to your end users, kind of as you do today with your existing carrier. So some companies might be using extension dialing, and some companies might be just using, straight up DIDs for each user. But there's essentially two ways to use Microsoft Teams telephony. And one is that Microsoft becomes the carrier, and then they are the ones who essentially are owning your DIDs or your service numbers. And then from there, you would need some sort of calling plan that would be able to handle the minutes that are distributed and used by each user. The second solution that's available within Teams is called direct routing. And so direct routing, what that essentially means in simple terms is that you can use a third-party carrier such as Rogers or ThinkTel, possibly Bell, TELUS. They all probably have solutions. I don't know about everyone. I've worked with a couple of these carriers so far, but it has to be an approved carrier by Microsoft that offers SIP service that can connect into Microsoft Teams. So what that does is essentially allows you to use your existing carrier. Let's say you have a contract with that carrier that you can't get out of for the next 1 to 2 years. This might be a good alternative to say, all right, I want to start using Microsoft Teams as my user interface, but I still want to have my carrier be the back end to handle my minutes and my long distance calling and things like that. So now Microsoft Teams has that availability with direct routing. And then just recently, as Kevin even mentioned, is there's something called Operator Connect, which basically allows it's kind of like an enhanced portal inside Teams to allow you to pick and choose which carriers inside your particular country can offer those SIP services to you. And then allow you to go in and configure that trunk from the carrier. Again, you'll still be negotiating your telco rates, whether it be local calling rates and long distance calling rates with those specific carriers. And I know that's probably going to draw a lot of questions from there. So if you have any questions from there, I'll pause there and if there's anything. Okay, and so this is where generally a lot of questions come out. Teams licenses, and I'll try to explain the breakdown here because this is where a lot of confusion comes in. Again, if you're assuming that you already have a Microsoft Office 365 subscription, there is a few licenses that are required to add on if you're going to use Microsoft Teams for voice calling. Okay, and so we just put E1, E3, and E5 as an example. Those aren't the only ones that are required as a base phone system, but we just using this as an example. You can have Business Premium, Business Standard as well. But E1, E3, and E5 are kind of like the baseline at this point. So assuming you have a base license of one of these three, you would require a phone system license in any case to be able to use the calling features inside Teams to dial out with a DID to an outside number such as a cell phone or a landline of some sort. You have to have that phone system license to be able to use the system. Secondly, where it gets a little bit more confusing is that if Microsoft is going to be your provider, in this case, the ones who manages and owns DIDs, then you would need some sort of calling plan. And these are the three calling plans that are available at the moment. And then you'll see the domestic 120 minutes, domestic calling plan, and then international calling plan. So each of these three calling plans is going to give you a certain number of minutes to use per user per month. And these are the corporate rates. So if you're a charity, these rates don't apply to you. We can discuss that offline in a separate call, but these are just the corporate rates that are available for now. So domestic calling plan typically gives you 3,000 minutes per user per month. And again, the 120 minutes is pretty self-explanatory. And the domestic and international calling plan is a mix of like 2,500 minutes, I think, for domestic and like 600 minutes for international calling. All of these plans, if you have, let's say, 10 users in the same geographical region, let's say the same area code, those users together, if they all had the same calling plan, would be pooled together from those minutes. So let's say you have 10 users with domestic calling plan in Toronto area, those 10 users would be pooled together. So 10 times 3,000 is 30,000 minutes to use as an aggregate, right? And that is every month that refreshes. There's no, what do they call it? Rollover or carryover from those minutes. There's no carryover at this point. This M365 Business Voice license, this is a bundled license, which basically includes all of the necessary components for you to turn on calling features within Microsoft Teams, assuming Microsoft is going to be the carrier. And again, that includes a calling plan here, the domestic calling plan. It includes the phone system license here. And it also includes an audio conferencing license, which allows you to schedule and host conference calls with an external number for users to dial into. Anybody who can schedule a conference call through Teams, but not necessarily everybody would have access to having users dial into a conference bridge unless they had this conferencing license. Hopefully that all made sense there. If I confused anybody, I apologize. Please let me know. Okay. So if no questions there, we'll move on. So next steps from here, again, there's generally, again, as I mentioned before, there's typically some workshops. If you're just kind of getting getting familiarized with Teams and you're not really sure whether or not the voice solution is right for you, depending on your organization and whether you fit certain criteria, Microsoft has some workshops that are available to you at pretty much no cost in this case, right? So we wanted to bring that up and let everybody know that you may qualify for one of these workshops, but please contact us and we will run through and check for you whether or not your organization qualifies for those, meets the criteria from Microsoft. And if not, we'd be happy to spend some time with you, at least go through and help you determine what the requirements are to get you stood up on Microsoft Teams. So one of the things that we have as an organization to help get started for some users who are maybe just trying to test this out, if you have maybe a small organization and you want to turn it on for a couple of users to get started with Microsoft Teams, we're offering a pilot with Microsoft calling plans, assuming that Microsoft is going to be the carrier. This would be like a net new installation for, let's say, up to 10 users to turn them on, create a simple call tree and call flow for those 10 users, assign them a DID, and turn on conferencing for them, and even document it for you. So we have this this pilot available for you. Please let us know if you're interested in taking advantage of that. Again, contact us at cloud@ProServeIT, or if you're familiar with myself and you have my email, you're welcome to email me directly or call me directly, and I'd be happy to discuss this further with you. And let's see. So for that, we are coming up close to 2:30, so open it up for question and answer period. And thank you.
So we do have a question here. So Kevin is asking, any preferences on vendors for Teams phone makers?
Good question. Typically, ProServeIT is pretty well agnostic when it comes to recommending vendors. I mean, we've worked with a few of them out there, right? So that some of the big ones are Polycom. Logitech has some good equipment if you're looking for some conferencing equipment. Again, Polycom has good stuff for conference equipment, and they even have, we've seen a lot of customers take advantage of their handsets for those that actually ended up wanting handsets. You still run into customers that are not ready to give up that handset, which is understandable. So, there are plenty of vendors out there that make handsets. The other one we've seen is Crestron, and what's the other one? I'm drawing a blank now on what the name of the vendor is. If I think of it, I will mention it. But Microsoft has a site that you can go to see all the different vendors that make compatible equipment for Teams telephony. So I can post that. We can post that as a follow up here to get you that link to that site. But there's tons of them. I don't have any that. Yes, thank you. Yealink, that's the one I was thinking of, Ken. Thank you. Again, lots of different vendors out there. They make good equipment. Essentially, there's only one requirement, and it has to be Teams compatible or Skype for Business. You might find that if you have been using Skype for Business, for an example, and one of the devices that you were using with Skype was compatible, that may be compatible with Teams as well with a simple firmware upgrade. But that's something you probably have to check with the vendor.
Perfect. Thanks, Tony. We do have a couple more questions coming in. So Forrest is asking, does that support analog phones / fax machines? And what about 911 calling?
Okay, very good. Good question. So analog phones and fax machines. Analog phones, no, there is really no support for analog phones unless you have some sort of intermediary device that connects, from the analog and basically transfers that to digital. Basically gives it allows it to be an IP phone. The same with fax machines. Normally, what we'd recommend with fax machines is that either you leave the existing fax service or phone number that's tied to that with the carrier that you have and leave it as is. Because a lot of people have fax machines in the office and lines that are coming in directly to the building and connected into those fax machines. That's one thing to do. The other thing that I see a lot of customers doing is going to some online fax service. eFax. There's probably a dozen of them out there that do this type of thing. And 911 calling, again, 911 calling is something that has to be set up for sure inside the system. Really, when we're setting up the phone system, or whoever, if you're setting up the phone system, it has to be configured. And typically, if you have a carrier, such as a telco carrier that's providing you service, they'll have some form of 911 configured already in the back end, and then inside Teams, the consultant would have to configure that inside Teams. But yes, it is possible. It's actually mandatory, not possible. I see Thomas here has a question as well. Can you make international calls without an international calling plan? Very good question. Thank you for reminding me. I meant to bring this up. So yes, you can make an international call without an international calling plan. And so what that's called inside Microsoft Teams is communications credits. Typically, that gets set up when you set up the audio conferencing feature. So let's say that a user, as an example, a user wants to dial out to England, for instance, from Canada, right? And you don't have a calling plan to do so. So you'd need some way to do that. So the way that it gets set up inside Teams is think about it from the old way of like a calling card. You'd buy a prepaid calling card, essentially, and that would allow you to dial out a certain number of minutes per month to be able to make that call. And it's the same sort of thing, is that you'd buy or you'd pay via a credit card for a certain number of minutes to be able to dial out to anywhere outside of the local area to that international calling destination, and it would just detract from that pool of dollars that you have. So that service is called communications credits, and that needs to be established. And then you can lock that down with inside Microsoft Teams to who has access to make those calls and who doesn't. I think we'll leave it there. Everybody, thank you again for joining, and we will tune in next time. Have a great week.